When an Indian speaker uses words like roj for daily, sadak for street, or bazar for market, they are using Persian loanwords that have been integrated into South Asian speech for centuries. This shared vocabulary reflects a cultural intimacy established long before modern geopolitical divides defined the region. Over 10,000 years ago, populations from the Iranian plateau were already mingling with the earliest inhabitants of India. Their descendants eventually pioneered the development of agriculture in the northwest and built the first major urban centers of the Indus Valley. To find the origins of South Asian identity, we have to look past the history of modern nations and back to the shared connections of the Bronze Age. Around 1500 BCE, migrating Indo-Aryan clans reached a turning point. A single nomadic group fractured. The western branch settled the Iranian plateau, forming Avestan culture, while the eastern branch moved into the Punjab, establishing India's Vedic traditions. This linguistic map shows how the two groups remained mirror images of one another for centuries. The Iranian concept of the moral order, asha, is identical to Vedic rita, just as the sacred Iranian beverage homa is the Sanskrit soma. These twin civilizations eventually moved out of contact, spending the next several centuries evolving distinct spiritual and social identities in isolation. Thousands of years later, during the medieval era, those two isolated branches crashed back together through new networks of trade and imperial expansion. Persian culture flowed steadily into the subcontinent, where it became the official lingua franca for administration and intellectual life, from the sultanates to the end of the 18th century. This era saw the arrival of Persian Sufism and the poetry of Rumi, which moved through the newly emerging local languages of the Indian North. As Sufi ideas found hospitable ground in India, they catalyzed the blossoming of the Bhakti movement. Bhakti poets adopted this egalitarian spiritual framework to openly question the rigid social hierarchies of the Varna caste system. This was an organic, long-term absorption that forged a permanent, hybrid Indo-Persian identity through shared art and belief. By the early modern period, the political fortunes of the Safavids in Iran and the Mughals in India were deeply intertwined. Mughal emperors sought sanctuary in Safavid courts, while Persian carpets and architecture defined the Mughal aesthetic, peaking in the Taj Mahal. But such close proximity also generated intense geopolitical friction, as both empires competed for the same regional dominance. In the 18th century, Nader Shah led a brutal invasion of India, sacking Delhi and looting the empire's accumulated wealth, including the legendary Peacock Throne. This medieval convergence was a double-edged sword, producing both a breathtaking cultural synthesis and periods of devastating imperial violence. The 19th century introduced an external disruption to this regional bond, the arrival of the British Empire. Wary of Persian influence on Indian cultural life, British administrators passed an act to replace Persian with English in all official and intellectual transactions. This was a deliberate strategy to reorient India's cultural compass away from its neighbors in the East and toward the Western world. While colonial laws could change the language of the courtroom, they could not easily erase the cultural habits formed over thousands of years of proximity. By the 20th century, the shared roots of India and Iran began to re-emerge from the shadow of colonial rule. In 1932, Rabindranath Tagore made a pilgrimage to Iran. He was welcomed in Shiraz and Tehran as a shared literary hero, with Iranians honoring the Indian poet as one of their own. Jawaharlal Nehru followed in 1959, officially reaffirming the deep historical and cultural ties that continue to link the two modern nations. While modern nation-states rely on weaponry and political borders to define themselves, these civilizations persist through the resilience of their shared music, poetry, and spirituality. The cultural bridge between India and Iran has outlived conquerors and colonists, remaining a brotherhood that still echoes in the streets of South Asia today.